All right, what's going on, everybody? So welcome to this live stream. We're going to be building a notes application using FastAPI and React. So as I'm going to give everyone a second to join in here, for anybody watching the stream after, this will be posted. This is going to be a full little tutorial here using FastAPI, React, and a database called HarperDB. Now, I've actually done this live stream before, so what I'm going to do here is just run through a demo, talk about how this stream's going to go. It should last maybe about an hour, 2 hours, and then we'll make sure it's posted after. But let's go ahead and just do the demo, and I also have a stream guide to go with this. So give me a second. Let me adjust the screens here. We'll make sure we can see the demo. And here's the application. So before we run through this, I actually did a video on this using Django and React. So we built out the API with Django and then React on the front end. So really, this is just a recreation of that stream. And let me just scroll down here, make sure my face isn't covering this. So at any point, I'll try to watch the chat. If my face covers any code here, just let me know. I'll try to pay attention here and make sure that everything is always visible. So we have this article to go with the stream right here. So if you're watching this live or if you're watching the stream after, make sure you're following this article. This is essentially everything we're going to do in this video, and I'm going to refer to this as we go through, just as a little guide for myself here. So here we have the stream guide right here. We have the project setup that we're going to go through. We'll configure our HarperDB database, and we'll create that API. We'll create the CRUD endpoints, and then we'll set up our React app and deal with things like course configuration, and then CRUD from the front end, and so on. So that's basically going to be our application. Let's run through this. So some of you may have already seen this. If I click on one of these notes right here, this is supposed to replicate the Notes app inside of the inside of the iPhone. So essentially, we have a note right here. We can modify anything. We can say note updated. And in the last stream, I actually had this update automatically, but I really didn't like the logic for something like a simple tutorial like this, where before, if we click back, that note would automatically be saved. What I did here is I added a save button. So if we update a note and then we hit save, we're going to see it right there. So we can always add a new note too. We can just go ahead and do something like that. Here we see the note, and we can always delete a note. So one more thing to take note of here is if I go to a note here, let's say I go to the last note, these are all sorted by the time it was updated. And by the way, let me know if you can hear the audio. I've had issues before. I just want to make sure that it's all good before we actually get into the stream. So here's the last note right here. If I update this note, let's just say I call save. What's going to happen here is this note is going to jump to the top. So that's how it happens on my phone. So that's what I'm trying to replicate. We also see the note count. So it's a very simple application. All right, so let's go ahead and just get started. We're going to start completely from scratch. We'll build out that API, and I'll just keep using this article. So let me close out a few things. Also, the source code is linked up in the video description. It's linked up in the article, which is in the video description, and you can find the source code right here. So we have the stream link for anybody reading that article and the source code. All right, so I'll leave the GitHub repo open. And what I'm going to do here is just close out the demo really quick, because I want to make sure that when we turn on our server, we're actually using the right application. So I want to make sure we're not using the demo. And let's get going from scratch here. So we'll go ahead and create a new folder. Zoomed in, I think, at 150%. If you need more, if you need the text to be a little bit bigger, let me know. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. But here's our folder. This is going to be our FastAPI application, and our React app is actually going to sit inside of this. If you want to host this later, how you host it is completely up to you. Some people like to use server-side rendering, where they actually basically host the React application inside of their FastAPI app, or if you're using something like Django, you can do that. Some people also like using something like Vercel, where they can deploy the backend on something like Heroku, and then the front end completely on its own. So that's up to you. We're not going to focus on that structure. We're just going to make this application work. So if I go to the article here, we're just going to start from step one. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and make some installations. We'll set up a virtual environment, and I'm going to call my app Notes app right here. So that's the name I'm going to give my folder. So let's start there. Okay, so looks like everything's good. All right, so we'll just call this Notes app. And this is going to be our FastAPI application. We'll go ahead and open this up in a text editor. I'm using VS Code, so I'm going to use that terminal. So we'll just drag everything into frame here. And let's find the folder. Okay, so Notes app. This is our empty project here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and create a main.py file. And we're just going to build everything in here besides our database configuration. That will be in its own file, but we're not going to focus on structure here. We're just focusing on making it work. So we'll just put the core business logic inside of main.py. So I also want to set up a virtual environment. So what I'm going to do is use virtual env and then just set up the virtual environment. This is going to be inside of my project folder. And I want to make sure I'm using the command prompt. Let's move this over. And obviously make sure you have Python installed and make sure you install virtual env, get that set up so you can actually run this command. And right, so just like always with live streams, I'm running into this issue. So let's try this again. From the command prompt, let's try this here. There we go. Okay. So we have our virtual environment. Let's go ahead and activate it. So we'll do virtual env or env scripts and then activate. And we're going to make some pip installs. So we'll clear this and we're going to pip install FastAPI. And we also want to install UVcorn for our ASGI server here. Okay, so we have those installations, or we'll get those in a second. Here's our virtual environment. Let me know if you can see everything. Yeah, it looks like I had a wrong spelling here. And yeah, we have that set up. Let's go ahead and create our application now. So we're going to do from FastAPI, import the FastAPI class. And we want to set up the app here. So we'll do app is equal to FastAPI. Okay, so our first route here, we're just going to use the app decorator, and we're going to set the first request method to a get request. So we have post, put, delete, and get requests that we're going to work with. And I see somebody in the chat. Please stop spamming the chat. I'll just mute that user for now. And if we have anybody, I think Praveen might also be in the chat as a moderator. So if you can, just stop any spam comments. Okay, so we have our first route. What I'm going to do here is set that to a /. So that's going to be basically that home URL, and we're going to create the actual function, and we're going to call this get routes. So this route is simply going to tell us all the routes inside of the application. So we'll just go ahead and return. And we're just going to return a list here, and we're going to specify all the routes we're going to have. So we're going to have a notes route, and this route is going to take a get and a post request, one to retrieve all the items and one to submit new notes. And then we're going to do notes, and we're going to throw in some kind of primary key. So these are the two routes we're going to have. So let's go ahead and turn on this server now. So we're going to do UVcorn. So we have that installed, and then we're going into the main file, and we're just going to go ahead and call app. And we also want to make sure we have reloading here. So we're going to do -- reload, and that should turn on our server on port 8000. So I'll do control click here, and here is our first route. So with FastAPI, we also work with Swagger UI. So we get this interface if we add in docs with a pound symbol after. So we get this awesome interface, and this is where we can see all the routes. We can make requests, and we can actually send, post, put, and delete requests directly from here. So we're not going to use anything like Postman. This is all going to be done directly from this interface. So if I execute a command here, we're going to see information about it. We're going to see the request URL and the actual response body. All right, so we have our first route set up, and let's just follow the stream guide here. So we set up our route. We're going to want to turn on our server, and now we want to talk about HarperDB. So we're going to set up the other routes in a second. So there's different ways we can go about doing this, and we're going to use something called HarperDB, which is a managed database. And I recently got introduced to this, and I really, really like HarperDB because of the simplicity and how you can actually use it. And one thing about HarperDB is you're actually able to basically perform SQL and no SQL operations. So we're just going to create a hosted database, and then we can send whatever data we want to that database. And in our case, we're just going to send a JSON object, and we're not going to have to predefine any tables like you would with something like MongoDB or Postgres. We're just going to send data, and all that data is going to be formatted and created for us, and then we can just make requests to it. So it's a lot simpler to configure. And after using this for a week, I just really fell in love with it. So this is what we're going to use for this project. So we're just going to go ahead and look up HarperDB, and it looks like I already have the search here. So HarperDB is the website, or harperdb.io. And what you're going to want to do here is go ahead and create an account. There is a free tier. There's actually quite a bit of usage you can put on this before you actually have to use a paid version of it. So go ahead and use this. And I don't think you need a credit card on file. I don't remember having to put one in. So once you create an account, go ahead and log into the studio. So it should be pretty easy to follow along. Go ahead and set everything up. And then once you get to the studio, you're going to want to create a database instance. So you're going to be asked for a username and password. And when you set that up, make sure you remember that, because this is how we're going to log into our URL. We're going to use the username and password for our specific database instance. And then we're also going to use this URL right here. So we can actually copy this, and this is what we'll use. So I already have this set up. I'm going to want you to set this up here. So go ahead and create it. And I'll actually probably delete my tables here and start from scratch. So go ahead and set that up. Once you have it, it's going to take about 5 to 15 minutes to actually create your database instance. So let that run through, give it some time. I created this in advance because I don't want to wait 5 to 15 minutes in a live stream. So yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and actually clear our current database. We're going to start from scratch. So I'll just remove all this. And once you're in your actual database instance, we're going to create a schema. So we're going to start by calling our schema notes app, and then we're going to create a table for this database. So our table name is going to be called notes. And then for the hash attribute, we're just going to call this the ID. So this is going to be that primary key for each table item. So if you look right here, we have an ID, a created time, and an updated time. So these are the only attributes we have for our database table. And once we start adding data, you're going to notice the columns get filled out here. So we're not going to have to predefine anything just yet. So we have our database instance, and then let's go back to our notes here. Once we have that set up, we're going to want to get this information and actually connect to this database. So there is a Python package called HarperDB. There's different ways to use HarperDB. There's actually what were they called? Custom functions. So that's another way to actually create some endpoints and connect to this DB. And I probably will make a video on that later. But for now, we're just going to connect from our FastAPI application. So we'll go in here. Let's run out of air. So let's go ahead and call pip install HarperDB. And this is going to install it. And what I'm going to do here is just run pip freeze, make sure we see all our dependencies. So pip freeze, and then requirements.txt. See a bunch of people in the chat saying hello from Kenya, from Nigeria, Ukraine. Let's see. Yeah, I have this weird habit of working with JavaScript and Python. So I just always use camel casing when I probably should use get underscore routes. But for now, I'm going to leave it like that. It's really not a big deal. So we ran pip freeze. Here we see our requirements. Everything is good. And let's go ahead and connect. So here is that Python package. And I accidentally opened up OBS. So that's going to take a second to close this out. And let's just look up HarperDB Python. So on pypy.org, pip install HarperDB. So this is what we're using. And I would highly recommend looking into this. So this is going to tell you how to connect to everything. So we're going to want to import it. And then this is where we actually make that database configuration. So we're going to set this variable and use harperdb.harperdb, pass in this information, and that's all we need. So once we have that, we have different methods that we can use to actually query the database. So we have our SQL commands and no SQL operations. So these are just some of the functions that we're going to work with. I'm not going to go into them. I'm just going to start using them, and then I'll explain what I'm doing as we go through this. So check this out. Make sure you're reading the documentation so that way you understand what's actually happening. So we have some people from Iran, Pakistan. Awesome. Thank you all for being here. Good to have you all in the chat. All right, so let's make this connection. We'll go back into the article. So what I'm going to do here is typically you'd want to set up some kind of environment variables. I'm not going to focus on that here. What I'm going to do here is just create a file. I'm going to put in my secret information, my password and username for my database, and then we'll just import it. So I'm going to hide it just for the stream. I'm not going to focus on setting everything up. So we have Turkey and Venezuela in here too. Awesome. All right. So list your country there. If it hasn't been listed, say hello. I'll try to pull you up in the chat here. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new file. We're going to call this secrets.py. I guess you don't have to do this. I'd recommend setting up a virtual environment, but we're just going to get moving quick here. So we're going to need, let's see, from our notes here, we're going to need our HarperDB password, URL, and username. So we'll throw that in here. And what I'm going to do here is go ahead and remove this from the screen. I'm going to add these values, and then I'm going to import these variables. So I guess before I actually set that up, let's go ahead and create another file called database.py. We have somebody from India. Is it Nepal? I'm trying to make sure I pronounce that right. Pakistan. I think I mentioned Pakistan already. A lot from India, South Africa. We have Malaysia. Awesome, awesome. And Germany. All right. So let's go ahead and import HarperDB. And did I do that right? Let's see. So HarperDB, that's all lowercase here. Okay, and we want to use this method here. So we're just going to call HarperDB.HarperDB. So I'm just going to paste this in here. Let's bring it in like this. Oops, what the heck did I copy? Okay, let's copy DB right here. And let's try pasting this in. All right, I guess I'm just going to have to write this out because that's not working. So db.HarperDB. So db is equal to HarperDB.HarperDB. All right, so we're going to need our username, and that's going to be imported from, so from secrets, import. So we're just going to make these imports right here. So HarperDB username, URL, and so on. So HarperDB password, HarperDB URL, and HarperDB username. We have somebody from Canada, Nigeria, Israel, and then Georgia. Is that the state or the country? All right. So let's go ahead and set that up here. So we'll do password. And let's throw in the URL at the top here. HarperDB URL. Okay, so I just want to make sure I did that right. So we have HarperDB. There we go. Awesome, awesome. And all these need to be lowercase. So let me just fix that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted with the chat and trying to code here. So Georgia, the country. Okay, so there we go. Indonesia here. Okay. Right, so that should be our configuration. What I'm going to do here is go into this file. I'm going to drag this off screen, or I guess I can just go full screen here. You'll get to see my face for a second, and I'm going to add in my information. So I'm going to hide this. Give me a second, and we're just going to throw everything in. So I'm going to start with my password and username. I have my morning face on, so maybe you can see my crow's feet if you're more zoomed in or if the screen is bigger. Okay, give me a second. We'll be right back. I just need to grab my database URL. New Mexico. Oh, that's right next to me. I'm in Nevada right now, in Las Vegas. It's like, I guess it's across Arizona, so it's not that close, but yeah. All right. So I added all my information into secrets.py. So that's all hidden. I have that imported from secrets. What am I misspelling here? Something looks wrong. From secrets, import. All right. I always seem to do this. Give me a second. Sorry, guys. Let me just make sure everything's done correctly. Edit anything out in the live stream. Well, it seems like everything's working, so let's just do this. Let's see if an error occurs. If we can't connect to it, then we'll fix it later. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and work with that. So let's make an import here. So we're actually going to want to import DB from our database file. So we'll close out this live demo. So once we have that, we're just going to import database, or from database, we're going to import DB. So that's going to be back in main.py. Okay, so we have that. And now we're going to make our first query. So let's just copy this route right here. And we're just going to call this one get notes. So we'll just do get notes. And again, we're just going to leave it as camel case from, oh, did I do form? I always do that. Let's see, form, from, there we go. Yeah, my eyes just don't catch that for some reason, and it's worse during live streams. So we're importing DB. Thank you for that, by the way. Somebody let me know about that. Okay, so we imported that, and let's make our first query. So we're first going to start with a NoSQL query. So if I go into the notes here, let's check this out. So we're just going to go ahead and call db.search by value, and this is all inside of this Python package right here. So this is where I got this information. We have search by value. We can also search by hash, which is the ID. And then we specify the schema, the table, the search attribute that we're looking by, and so on. So we just want to get all the items from the database here. So let's just start writing this query. And I'm going to close out this other file here. So we'll do notes. That's going to be db.search _by _value. And we're going to specify the schema. So we'll do notes app. And then we need to specify the table. So we call this notes. And then let's grab the other operations. So we're going to throw in the value that we're looking by. So we're looking by the ID. Well, technically, we just want to return all the items, but we do need to specify the ID. So we'll just throw in, or we need to specify some kind of attribute that we're searching by. And then we're going to throw in the wildcard and then the get _ attributes method. And let me explain what's going on here. So we're throwing in a wildcard, which means that we're not actually going to filter anything here. We're getting the attributes that we want. We're also throwing in a wildcard that can be in a list. And we're just saying, give us everything here. So once we have that, we'll just go ahead and change the return method to notes. And let's make sure our server is on and check this out. All right, so username, invalid syntax on line 6, database.py. Username, HarperDB _username. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me just pull up the notes here. Let me just copy all of this, actually. I guess it didn't work last time, so let's try it again. Okay, so it looks like there was just a misspell there. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. And at this point, we're not going to get any data because if you look at our table here, so this is our HarperDB Studio, we have no records in here. So we should just get back an empty array. If that's working, that means everything went fine. And then we're just going to actually add some data. So we'll start here and then we'll go into notes. We want to make sure that the route is correct here. So inside of main.py, we're going into notes here. And there we go. So we see this empty array, and then I can also just do docs and then the pound symbol. Oh, I was supposed to do this right here. So I can just do docs like that. And then here I see the other route to get the note. So I can try it, execute it, and here is our empty array. So I'm going to try to stick with this here. Okay, so we have that set up. Let's go into our guide here. And we want to actually add some data. So let's create a route to modify some data, to actually add some data into the database. And actually, based on the stream guide here, I also want to show you how to do NoSQL operations. So what I'm going to do here is copy this, and I want to show you how you can use both. So if I comment this out here, and I'm going to paste in this next query, we can actually call db.sql for those of you that want to run your own SQL queries, or maybe you want to customize something. We can go ahead and use the SQL function and then run that query. So select from notes app, notes, order by, and then we're just going to order by the descending, or the ordering will be the descending value. And we're just going to make sure that the latest or the most recently updated item is at the top. So that's how we can run an SQL query. So I'll leave this in here for you in the GitHub repo, and that way you can use both methods. So I wanted to show you that you can actually run SQL queries. All right, so we'll go back into our guide, and we want to add a note. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and import the body class here. So there's different ways you can actually do this. I actually have another video on FastAPI And you can use something like Pydantic. You can structure your own values here as you want. We're just going to use the body class because I just want to access all the data sent from the front end and then extract whatever I need piece by piece. So let's set this value, and we're going to set this to the body class here. So we're actually going to get the data from the front end. And this is actually supposed to be in a new route here. So let me just bring this down, and we're going to call this app. We're going to use a decorator, app.post, and we are going to send that to notes, so /notes, and we're sending a post request, and then this is going to be called add note, and we're going to throw in data body right there. Okay, and then the return value is just going to be this SQL query. So let me just grab this one right here that's commented out. So we just always want to return the note. So this will be the last thing that we do is anytime we add an item, we just want to get back a list. But now we actually want to process this request. So to actually add this value, we'll just do db.insert. So this is how we can add an item to the database. We need to specify the schema, so notes app. We need to specify the table that we're adding this item to. So we're adding that into notes. And if I take a look at the notes here or my stream guide, we're just going to specify schema, table, and then we have an array where we can add in multiple objects at a time. So we just need to throw in the JSON object here. So we're throwing in an array, and we're just going to say, let's throw in the body, and the body will be data. And then we're going to send from the front end the attribute body here. So if you look at the database schema right now in the table, we only have an ID created and updated column here. So when we send this, if we don't have a body column, this will get created automatically. So that's the cool thing about this is we don't have to predefine this. Some people may like that. Some people might not. I guess that's for you to decide what you want to use and what you prefer. So we're inserting that note, and that's going to be it. So let's go ahead and save that. We have that post request. Let's go to the front end. I want to refresh the documentation here for the docs UI. And here we have our post request. So the method I'm using, we're just going to have to completely define our object right here. It's going to be sent as a string. So we'll try it out, and we'll just create our object. So this is how we'll actually send it from the front end. So let's go ahead and send the body. We're going to use double quotes here, and we'll just say, let's see, our first database entry. Okay, so if I send this request, that should add this item to the database if everything worked correctly. So we see that request, we have an error, something is not working. Let's see, what did I do here? So db.insert. Right, let's see. Here, let me just print out data too. We want to make sure we can actually see what's being sent. Maybe I sent the request wrong. Let's see, we have body in quotes here. Let's try this one more time, and we'll check this out. Oh, did I not send that to the right request? No, that looks correct. You wrote, okay, in the end, let's see. Ah, there you go. Thank you. Awesome having the chat. I guess the one advantage to, or one of the advantages to live streaming, you have people helping you out. Okay, so we sent that request. It looks like everything went well, and here is the object that we sent. We query the database right after, so here we go. We query all the notes, and we see this array of notes here. So if we look into if we go back to our HarperDB Studio, let's go ahead and just refresh this, and we can actually specify auto refresh right here. Here we go. So we didn't have this body column. So that was just added based on the data that we sent. So that's really cool about it. We don't have to specify anything in advance. We just send it and it gets created. So that is our first post request. So let's go ahead and move on to getting an item here. So we want to make sure we can actually get a single object. So if I go back into my API right here, so the API UI, let's go ahead and call get now. And let's just get all the items. Here we go. We see that one item. So now we want to get an object. So if you look at this, this is an array. If we try to add another item, let's just make another request, I guess. We'll try it out. All right, so we'll do body, and we'll just say second item added. I can't spell, so second like that. Whatever, we're not going to worry about the spelling, so let's just send it. Cool, so now we have 2 items. We have this array with 2 different objects. So we want to get a single item. So this is going to be placed just underneath get notes now. So we'll do decorator app.get. So this will also be a get request. The endpoint for this will be notes, and we're going to try to make this a RESTful API. So we're just going to throw in the ID. So we're going to notes and then passing in an ID right there, and we'll just call this get note. So it's not going to be plural now. And at this point, we want to get the ID, and I'll just call that primary key, and we'll just say that this has to be a string. So we want to get the note, and we just want to return back a single note. So to get this note, let's just go ahead and call notes, and we're just going to run this same query right here. So let's just call this one, and we'll bring this in right here. So we want to search by the attribute. So we just need to modify this, and let's see, how did I do this? So we get the note, we search by the attribute, and we just throw in PK. So at this point, I guess we're just going to do search by hash, and we're going to throw in the actual ID here. So we'll throw in the primary key, and once we update this right here, so we'll do search by hash. I accidentally clicked F11. So once we have that, let's just get the first index. So by default, HarperDB will always return back, or at least with these queries, it will always return back an array. So we're just going to get the first index. So get us our notes, make sure we have that same ID. And technically, it's only going to be 1 item in the array. And we're just going to get back the first item. So we're getting index 0. And now what I can do is go ahead and make a request here. So let's get this item right here. So we're going to copy this ID. And then we'll go down here. Let's refresh everything. And let's find our new route. Okay, so here we have our get notes or get note value. We'll try it out. And now it's requesting the ID. So we'll execute it. And here we go. We have our object. So let's just finish up with our put and delete request. So we want to be able to update an item and then delete it. Okay. Why is PK not a string, not an IN? Okay, so at this point, we're using, I believe that's a UUID value. So that needs to be a string because it's going to be numbers and letters. And technically an ID shouldn't be an integer. Okay, so we'll do app.put. So now we're sending a put request. And this is going to be sent to notes. And we need to know what value we're going to update. So we're passing in the ID or the primary key. Bring this down here. And we'll just do update note. Okay, so in here, we're going to throw in the primary key. This is going to be a string value. Return. And let's just get all the notes here. So let's just take this same query again. We'll take this one. And every single time we're returning notes, bring that down here. And now we want to actually update an item. So if we look into, or if we look inside of our stream guide, we're calling db.update. We're specifying the schema, table, and then we're just passing in a new object. So we can actually update multiple items in a row. And what we have to do here is pass in the ID value. So this time we actually have to throw in an ID because it needs to know what item we're updating. So let's do db.update, pass in the schema. Well, that's going to be notes app, and then we'll just do notes. And we're passing in an array. We can throw in multiple items. For the ID value, this is going to be the primary key. And we just want to throw in the new body. Let's see. Added an extra curly brace there. So we want to throw in a new body, and we'll just say data. We need to specify that right here. So that's going to be the request body. Data is equal to body, getting that information. And we're just getting data.body. There's somebody from Bangladesh. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I wish you had your real name so I can actually address you by that instead of find me. Makes it a little bit more personable. Okay, so Let's go back in here. We can go into your Swagger UI or our Docs UI. Here we have our put request, and let's just pass in the note that we want to update. And I think I still have that ID. No, I need to get that ID. So let's go into our get request. Let's just grab one of the items, and let's just update our first item. Here, did I not execute this? Oh, here we go. Execute. Oh, that was the get routes endpoint. So let's update our second item. So we'll go down into our put request, pass in the ID. So we want to know what item we're updating, and we just want to send a new object. So we'll just do body. Second item updated. Execute it, and let's check it out. Everything looks good. Second item updated, awesome. And if we go back into our HarperDB Studio, here we go. We have our two items, and now we just want to delete our notes, or we want to add in a delete request, and this one should be easy. So app.delete, and we are going to notes. We also want to know what note we're deleting, so we're passing in the primary key here. Sharir Shuvo is in the chat. Good to have you here. Sharir is going to be my my backup here if anything goes wrong. So he's my CSS and React expert. All right, so we're passing in the primary key. That's going to be the string value. And let's just call database delete. So at this point, I just want to query all the items in the database again. So I want to see all the notes after I delete it. I want to see that new array. So we'll just return notes. And then we're going to call db.delete. I believe that's the name here. So we're going into schema of notes app, notes, and let's just go into our stream guide. So somebody's asking about the database type. So this is a HarperDB. It's a managed database, something that's really cool. I'm really excited to use it. It's definitely makes everything a lot not simpler, I guess. It's just really cool. It has a lot of cool features to it. So I'm liking it. So we can delete multiple items at a time. So we're just going to throw in our primary key. So this is the value that we're going to delete. All right, let's check it out. Let's grab the database ID. So here's the object. So let's delete the second item. So let's grab that. We'll go back into our Docs UI or API UI. Now we have that delete request. Let's try it out. Back an array with only one item. So awesome. We're able to delete that. If we go back into our database table, here we go. This is all we're seeing. So the name is Shakib, I believe, if I'm pronouncing that right. All right. So we're done with our API. Now it's time to move on to the React front end. So we're going to create these as two separate applications, and then we're going to connect them. So let's move on to the next step here. So at this point, I'm going to keep my React application in the same folder. So how you want to set this up is completely up to you. But what I'm going to do here is just open up a new terminal here. And I'm going to, from the Notes app, call npx create-react-app. So just as a quick background, make sure you have Node.js installed. I'm not going into actually teaching React. I do have a full tutorial on React already, and I might update it since React Router DOM version 6 came out and React 18 came out. So I might make an update. You're going to see the later version of it, but I think I might make a crash course and talking about those changes and actually implementing everything using those newer versions. So at this point, I'm just going to use everything. I'll mention what's newer in the newer versions of React. So we'll just kind of skim through it and actually focus on the application itself. So for the folder structure, we're just going to call this front end. So npx create React app, and then we specify the folder name. When we execute that, this is going to create all our boilerplate code for our React application. You should see this folder right here called the front end. Right now, all the files are being built out. And then we're just going to do some cleanup, run our React app, and just see what we have before we start working with it. So while this is being created, let me just go into the chat here. I always have this thing where I start speaking too fast and then I run out of air and then it just sounds like I choked. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to see what you're referring to. What's the advantage of using UIDs instead of integers? Well, integers are risky. So there's more of a chance in duplicating an ID, more of a chance in somebody finding, let's say if somebody hacks into your database, they can find a user based on a UI or based on an ID. Because if you're starting from, let's say 1, I already know that you have an entry in the database with the ID of 1. So that's kind of the issue there. UIDs are these long 16-character strings. They're a lot less likely to have duplicates. It's just safer that way. So there's certain things like that that you want to consider. It's just best practice as opposed to just using IDs. Okay. So we have our React application. So it just finished up right here. We can see that we can start our server. So what I'm going to do here is CD into the front end. So I CD into the front end. Why is that not working? Oh, wow. I misspelled front end. So let's recreate this, and then I'll do that again. So npx create React app front end, like that. Give that a second. I'm just going to delete this folder. It's technically not that big of a deal, but I'd rather have the right spelling. And it gives me a second to be in the chat here. So yeah, someone's asking, can we get a Django React login register tutorial? I actually have one called, I believe it's refreshing JSON web tokens. And I have Django in the logo, but it's not really, or in the thumbnail, but it's not really focused on Django, even though we're using it. But check that one out. I basically use JSON web tokens to actually work with authentication, and I use the context API for that. All right, so that folder is deleted. It's created a new one. Terry, I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you reaching out in the chat too. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. So let's just try npm, or let's cd into front end, and then we'll do npm start. So this is going to run our server on port 3000, and if I call this, it's going to go ahead and open it up automatically, so I don't have to open it up. So opened in my other window, give it a second. So we're going to have our React terminal, or port, and our FastAPI port, and our React port. So this is our React application. So let's go ahead and make sure it's opened in this window here so I can work with this a little bit better. So I already have port 3000 saved here. Let's close out some of our files. We'll close out the source code. Here is our React application. So let's start with some cleanup. So what I'm going to do here is get rid of any file that isn't relevant to us right now. So these are still important files, but we don't want to deal with these at this point. So I just want to clean up here. And then if you need to change something later, or you need to use these, either don't delete them or just add them in later. But for now, we're getting rid of anything that we're not using. So let's just go through this. So the only files in our source folder that we should have left are app.css, app.js, and index.js. Now, this is going to throw some errors because we're importing report web vitals. We just deleted this, so we want to make sure to delete the imports. We deleted index.css. So let's save that, and we'll go into app.js, remove the logo. So we're no longer using that. And let's go ahead and just say hello world inside of our app component. Okay, so now if I go back into the front end, this is what we should have. We just see hello world. So that's our simplified application. All right, so what I want to do here now is build out some components. So we created our React app. We deleted the files that we need to remove. And by the way, this is in that stream guide for anybody that's joining that's new here. I want to keep referring to this. This is what we deleted if you want to delete those. And what we're going to do is create a components folder and a pages folder. So we're going to have components for things like our header, our layout, every single list item. We're going to separate those into their own components. And then we're going to create two pages, one called note for a single item, and then notes to render out the list of notes. So let's build this out. And for now, we're just going to create a default component for every single component. So we're just going to create the default, and then we'll start building them out. And I guess I'll actually explain the next step in a second. So let's just close this out. So inside of our source folder, we'll go ahead and create a new folder called components. And then we're going to create a folder called pages. So for our pages, we're going to create a file called notes.js with a capital N. And I have this extension called React E6 code snippets. Let me look this up really quick. So I think it's ES7 code snippets, React Redux code snippets. So if you want to do what I'm doing here, install this. And what's going to happen here is you're going to have these keywords that you can use. And these are going to build out components and basically prep imports for us just by using these code snippets. So you'll see what's going to happen in a second. So right now, if I do our React arrow function component exported, so RAFCE, And then if I scroll down here, what's going to happen here is it's going to create a component based on my file name and then get this prepped for me. So there's different types of components you can use. You can use just a regular functional component. I'm using arrow functions. So that's all inside of that extension. And this is with VS Code. So if you want to use that, go ahead and use it. It's going to make things a lot faster for you. So we created our notes component. Let's go ahead and create our note component now. So note.js, and we're going to do React arrow function component exported. Go ahead and click that. There is our note component or note page. And then we want a list item.js component. I'll just keep using the shortcode here, and we'll just do header.js for the header component. Also use the shortcode, and let's just get those ready. So we also want a layout component too. Right, so we're just using those shortcodes. If that doesn't work for you, just go through this video and hand code these out. Okay, so we have our components, and I want to build out my header component and my layout component, and then we'll actually get into routing. So we're going to create some actual pages. So pages are components, right? Yeah, so somebody's asking about this. Technically, a page is a component. All we're dealing with is components. We're just separating those because our note and notes component will just be, or our notes page will just be components, but those are like higher level components because we can nest components within other components. Okay, so let's look at the notes now. And by the way, if you're on this Medium link, make sure you follow me. I just set up an account. I have 107 followers. It'd be nice to get some support here, and I'll keep writing stuff. So inside of our header, we're going to create a div with the class name of app-header, and then h1 tag with the value of note list. So we'll do class name, and then this will be app-header, and then an h1 tag in here. Accidentally deleted that. And then we'll just do h1, and we'll call this notes list. Okay, so we have our header component, and we're going to move on to layout. So essentially inside of our layout, we want to import our header component. So this way we're not having to re-import it everywhere. We're just going to create our layout and then make sure that all the children of this component basically just extend this layout. So let's start with importing our header. So we'll go into layout, and we're using the short code of IMP. So this is going to give us an import right here. So it's going to give us this default import, and then we can go into our components folder, which we're already in there, and then we'll just import our header. So inside of the layout component, we're going to get props here, and inside of this main div right here, we're just going to add in the header component, and then we're going to add in all the children. So every single item that's going to inherit or extend this layout. So we're going to do props.children. So that's where they're going to sit. And then we also want to add in a class name for some styling. So our class name is going to be container, and then we're going to use the dark class, and I'll explain what's going to happen here. And then we're going to wrap it with a class name of app. So we'll do dark. That's going to give us dark mode. And we're going to wrap this in another div, and we're going to call this one app. Okay. So let's just grab the header and props.children, bring this inside of app. And that is our layout. Okay, so we have the layout, and now we want to bring this layout into our app.js page here. So this is that main component. This is where we configure all our routing and everything like that. So somebody's asking about routing. Yeah, we're going to add that right now. So let's see. I have had experience with TypeScript. I don't use it that often because honestly, I don't know. I have my reasons for not using it, but that'll be a topic for another day. So let's go ahead and install React Router DOM. So that's what we're going to use for our routing. Because we're dealing with a single page application, we're not able to just add links. We're going to use React Router DOM, and that's going to take care of our navigation. So make sure you're CD'd into your front end folder. I opened up a new terminal, so that's why I have to do it like that. And then we're going to call npm install react-router-dom. Okay, we'll run that install. Let's go into our notes while that's installing. And did I cover that? No, okay, good. So thought my face covered that. Okay, so at this point, we're going to install React Router or some items from React Router DOM. We're going to install browser router, routes, and route. And then we're going to import our components, and then we're going to create our router layout here. So let's go ahead and start importing from React Router DOM. At this point, I can do imd, which is going to give me a destructured import. And this is coming from React-Router-DOM. And we're going to import browser router. And then we're going to do as router. So that's what we want to call it. I'll fix some indentation. So we're importing browser router as router. And then we want to import routes. And I think we want to import route. Just want to make sure. Okay, so we have routes and route. All right, let's get our components now. So now we want to import some pages. So we want to set some routing here. So we'll do import. We're using this IMP shortcut. We're going into pages and we're going into notes. And then we're going to grab notes right here. Let's copy and paste this. We'll bring in note. So we're just going to remove the S. And we're going to do another import for our layout component. So we're going into components / layout, and let's bring in layout. And I'm not going to destructure that import, so I use the wrong shortcode. Okay, so we have these. And what we're going to do is just change this entire div right here to router. We're setting that up as router. Once we have the router, we want to use our layout. So this is what's going to go ahead and make sure that everything else inherits from the layout here. So we're just going to extend the layout. We're wrapping that. And if we go into our notes, we have the layout. And then we're creating our routes and then the actual route. So routes right here replaces switch. For anybody that's familiar with the old version of React Router DOM, we're no longer using switch. We're going to use routes. And I see Florin Pop is in the chat. Wow, Florin, I have not seen you forever. You troll. It freaked me out. Yeah, okay. Scared me. I thought I was talking with the audio this whole time. Okay. That's classic Florin right there. Yeah, good to see you, bud. I know you're dealing with some burnout. That's awesome to see you active, though. Okay, so we have our routes. Let's go ahead and create our first route now. And there's a little difference here, or a slight difference from what from what we used to do in React Router DOM version 5. So at this point, we specify the element. So it used to be called component, and now we throw in element, and then we actually throw in the component in here. So we're just going to throw in notes. I keep laughing because of Florin's comment. You're hilarious. Okay, so we have the element. We need to specify the path. So what's the URL pattern to actually go to this page? So we're throwing in notes right here. The path is going to be /. And then we also want to make sure that we throw in exact here. So essentially, I'll explain what's going on here for anybody that doesn't know. But if we throw in another route, so we're going to also throw in the note component. And for note, we just need to pass in the ID. So we're going to / and then ID. Well, the issue here is that technically, if we go to this route, it starts with a /. So we're going to get back both components. We want to make sure that this component only renders when the route matches this exactly. So that's why we throw in that little thing right there. Okay, so now that we have this, let's make sure our server is running. I made you laugh. You should become I should become a stand-up comedian. Yeah, you're a funny guy, Florin. All right, so let's go back into our application, and here we go. So we see our notes list extending our layout right here with that header. We see notes, and then if I go to 1, we should see the note and so on. So this value right here is dynamic. So that's how we're getting the notes, and then we go back into note. All right, let's go back into the guide now. Now what we want to do is render some dummy data. So I just want to make sure the application is functional before we actually start making our API calls. So let's go ahead and actually do this. So we'll go back into our notes page, and I'm just going to copy and paste some dummy data, and then I'll just show you where to get this, and then you can use whatever you want for this section. So we'll scroll down here, and we're just going to grab this array right here. So it's an array of objects, and we're just going to render out some notes. So here we have dummy data. We have an array, a body with an ID. The ID is going to be an integer, or I guess it's a string, but it is a number. Then we have the body, and then we just have item 2 and 3. So we have our dummy data, and we're just going to loop through and render out this data. So what I want to do is import the list item component, and I want to make sure that I created this. So we have the list item here. So let's just import list item, bring this in, And that's going to be going into, or that's coming in from components, list item, and list item. Okay, so I'm also going to use state and use effect later. So I'm just going to import those right now and actually start using them. We'll use state, but we'll use effect a little bit later. So we'll call use effect. And to set up our state, we're just going to go ahead and set up notes and set note. And for the first value, normally this would just be an empty array inside of use state. So we would normally do that before we load in data, but because we already have some dummy data, we'll just throw in dummy data like that. So we're actually going to use our state here. So once we have that state, we're just going to go ahead and loop through all these notes and render them out. So for now, I'm just going to create a UL tag, and we'll change this later. We're going to create a list here, and we're just going to loop through all of our notes. So we're going into notes.map, and we're passing in the note object. Let's loop through this. And for each note, we want to render a list item. So we'll throw in li like that. We do need a key prop because React is going to yell at us if we don't. So let's just pass in the ID for the key prop, and then we'll throw in list item for the component. And inside of my list item, I want to pass in note, and then this is where we'll actually access the note body. So we'll pass in each note on each iteration of the loop. We'll save that, and then if we go into list item, we'll destructure the props here. So we'll take in the note, and in here, we're just going to do note.body. All right, I hope that makes sense. We have our list item component. We loop through and render out every single note. And let's just see what we have. So here are our notes. We have get milk, wash car, and start coding. I guess the stack doesn't really have a name. This is FastAPI and React in a HarperDB. So FRA, I guess, FastAPI, React, and HarperDB. Yeah, I guess that's the acronym. But yeah, I don't think it has an official name yet. We'll make it one though. So we have our note, and inside of our note item, we want to link to the actual note page. So let's do this. So what I'm going to do is go into that list item, and I'm just going to link to the specific note. So let's actually link it up. So we'll go into list item, and we do need to import link from React router DOM. So React router DOM. So we can't just use an A tag here. So we'll bring in link, and this link is going to be a lot like the A tag, except for it's meant for React. So we'll do link, and then we'll just do 2 instead of href like we normally would do. And we're going to use backticks. We're going into / and then note.id. That's how we link to the actual note page. And then we're going to go into the note page and actually get the note data for each note. So if we go in here, let's click on each note. Here we go. Perfect. If you look at the top here in the URL, you'll notice each ID changes based on the note as we click on it. So let's get some note data. So inside of note, we'll go into note.js here. What I want to do here is, by default, I want users to be able to edit the note immediately. So we'll just add in a text area. So we'll do text area, and then we're just going to add in the value of the note itself here. So we'll add in use state and use effect. We'll need all of these later, and I think we're going to use the state right now. So we'll do use state, use effect, and then let's get this dummy data. So I know this isn't the best way of doing this, but we're going to go to using real data in a second. So for now, we'll just use the dummy data. So that way it's not really dependent on this actually. So we have the dummy data. Let's go ahead and get a note ID here. So based on the URL, I need the ID. And before, we used to do match like this. So this is how you're able to get the note ID like this. You were able to do match. And then I think it was a .params.id. But with React Router 6, we can no longer redo that. We can no longer do that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to import a hook here from React-router-DOM. So we're importing a hook called use params. So use params is going to give us access to the actual parameters. So we have use params. So what we're going to do is go ahead and use this hook called params, and we'll call use params. Okay, so we have params right here, and now the note ID is going to be params note.id. And the reason why we can access this by the ID value is because we called the parameter ID right here. Okay, thanks for jumping in, Florin. It's good to have you. I used to jump in on his streams all the time. It was a lot of fun when he streamed regularly. Okay, so let's do this. Let's create a variable called found note. So we'll just call it that. And we're just going to go into dummy data, and we want to find this specific note. So we're going into dummy data.find, and we're going to find the note by the ID. So we're just going through this array, and we're going to find the specific note that we want. So I believe it's note. So we're going into the note here. We're going to loop through this, and we're just going to make sure the note.id value is equal to note ID. Okay, so that should give us the note. And then we want to set up our state here. So we're going to call note and then set note, and we'll do use state. I probably should get rid of these auto fills so it's not messing up the streams. So we have our note, and we're just going to pass in found note. And I want to make sure that I did this correctly. I always get mixed up with JavaScript and Python stuff. So we do find note.id is equal to no ID. Okay, perfect. So we get our note here, and now let's render the note in the body. So once we find that, let's go ahead and actually throw this in the text area. So we'll just do value, and this is going to be equal to note.body. And now the issue here is that if we call this before we actually have a note, it's going to take a second to actually load in a note when we're making the API call. We're just going to throw in a question mark here, and if we don't have a note yet, it's just going to be null. So we also, with a text area, need to have an on change value. So on change, we're just going to go ahead and call this function. So we're just going to update the actual note value. So we're going to call set note, and the value of the note as we're typing here is going to be e.target.value. So the current value of this text area. So we also want a placeholder value. So let's just do enter note like that. And let me just move this over so you can see everything. So that's all we did. So we have an on change value, the value to the actual note. We get the note from this dummy data, and we get the note ID from the URL parameter. Okay, so let's check this out. Let's see if we have any errors. So if we go to get milk, here we go. We have get milk. If we go to start coding, and if we start typing, it's updating the state. So everything is looking good. So let's just finish up this page, and then we're going to start making some API requests. So inside of note.py, we have our dummy data. We got the note, and I just want to add in some links here. So there's a few things that are going to happen. There's a few things that are going to happen here. So we're going to be able to go to this page by clicking on an actual note. Now, another way we can go to this page is by clicking add note. So just like you saw in the demo, we're able to add notes from this notes page. So we're just going to import link here and have the ability to actually enter a new note. And that's going to send us to the same page, and we need to make sure that we can actually account for that. So we're going into react-router-dom. Let's bring in link here. And at the top of the page here inside of notes, we'll just do link. We're going to, and we're just going to go ahead and go into the notes page, and we're going to pass in add as the parameter. So this value of ID right here is actually going to be add when we click on the add link. So we'll just do add, and let's check this out. So if I go to the front end, if I click add, here we see add, and then if we click on a note, we're going to see an ID. So we want to be able to work with both of those. So let's go into our note component now. Let's see. Just checking out the chat. Looks like we have some questions, but I'll get to these a little bit later. I don't want to interrupt the stream for anybody watching this after. So we'll go into our div here inside of note.js, and we're going to add in a delete button. So we'll just do button, and this will be a delete button. We also want a save button. So we'll bring this underneath the text area. And then later on, we'll actually use icons when we add in styling. So we'll do save. And we also want link from our page here. So, or we want to import link from React Router DOM, and we want users to be able to go back whenever they need. So we'll do link, call this one go back, and we're pointing to the notes page. So we're just going back to that notes page like that. So we just added in 3 links and buttons here. So let's check it out. So If I go to get milk, we see go back, so I can go back. I can see delete and save. But if I go to add a note, I don't want this delete button to be there because there's no reason to have a delete button if we're only creating a note. It's not even there. So let's go ahead and actually hide this. So for this delete button, let's just add in a question here. So we're just going to say if the note ID is not equal to add, that means that we're currently editing a note. So we'll just go ahead and add this condition. Then we're going to take this button and we're going to throw this in here. So this button will only render if the note ID value is not add. So let's check this out. So if I go back here, click on add, we don't see the delete button. That's because this is a string called add. If we go to start coding, we see the delete button. So perfect. We have what we need. I think we have all our links. And let's jump back into the stream guide. Let's see. Now we're going to start making requests to our API backend. So the first thing I want to do is actually configure our CORS here, or CORS middleware. So CORS stands for cross-origin resource sharing. And essentially what's going to happen here is our front end is on port 3000 and our backend is on port 8000. So essentially, when we try to make a request from port 3000, FastAPI is going to say, whoa, I don't know who you are. You can't come here. So it's just going to block that request. So we need to go to FastAPI and we need to tell FastAPI what kind of methods we can accept from port 3000 and what endpoints can we actually accept. So we can actually put in port 3000 and then later on, this would be some kind of live domain. And anytime a request comes from that specific URL, then it'll accept it. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to configure our CORS middleware and we're just going to say, hey, go ahead and accept any port. Now in production, we might want to specify actual URLs that we can accept. But for now, we're just going to say, go ahead and accept everything. And that can be done with a wildcard. So let's go ahead and configure this. So what I'm going to do here is just look up FastAPI CORS. And this is how I recommend you do things too. So I just want to go ahead and do that search. There is a link in the video description, but I would recommend just doing the Google search and getting used to looking into the FastAPI documentation. So at this point, if we're looking through the documentation, we need to make this import. So we're just going to import from FastAPI middleware.cors import cors middleware. So we'll bring that in. That's going into main.py. So we'll go back into the backend here. We'll bring that in. And then once we have CORS middleware set up, here we have the origins. So these are the URLs that we can actually allow here. So this is the example that we see here. So what I'm going to do is just grab this right here. And we're going to bring this just below app. So we need to make sure that it's below because we're doing app.add middleware. And for the origins, instead of using those origins that were provided, we're just going to throw in a wildcard like that. So that's just going to allow everything to hit this endpoint. So it's all local, doesn't really matter. So at this point, we're good to go. And here's where we can allow the methods. So we can specify specifically what we allow. We have a wildcard. So we're going to allow get, post, put, delete, and everything else. Let's see. JVP design CORS is the bane of every full stack developer's existence. I mean, it's pretty easy to handle with Django too. I mean, I've only done it with Django, Flask, and FastAPI. I know a lot of people have issues with it. That's because when you get the error, it's not really self-explanatory. A lot of newer developers have an issue with it. I'll show you what the error looks like, by the way, in a second. So we just configured this, and now we can actually make requests here. So let's go into our get notes component, and let's make this request. So let's close database right there. And let's see, source, we're going into pages and notes. Okay, so we don't need this dummy data anymore. I'm just going to comment this out. It's in the GitHub repo if you want to see what this is. It's also in that stream guide. And for the dummy data here, we want an empty array. So if I save this, we should, in the front end, have an empty list here. Here, let's close this out. So from the front end, we should go back here, and now we don't have anything. So we have no notes. So inside of our HarperDB database, if we look here, we have one note. So we should get back this specific note, and then we'll actually add to it. So let's make that request. So we're going to create a function called get notes. We're going to camel case that, make sure it's an async function because we are using async await, and we're making that the arrow function. And let's just go ahead and call response, or set a variable called response. That's going to be equal to await. Let's call fetch, and then let's specify the endpoint. So the first endpoint is going to be, let's see, port 8000, and then we're going into notes. And later on, we're actually going to set up a proxy URL so we don't have to do port 8000 like this every single time. We're just going to be able to do something like this. So before we do that, though, let's make the request. We have the URL here, and then we'll do data. So we're getting back this data. We're going to parse it. So we're going to do response.json. Make sure this is JSON data. And once we get back that data, that should be an array. And we want to go ahead and call set notes. See why? Oh, that's supposed to be plural. Okay. So let's call set notes right there. And we're going to pass in data. And let's give this a test. So before we do that, we also need use effect. So we have use effect. We're going to throw in the arrow function. And we're just going to call get notes. So use effect is going to trigger on our first load. We're going to throw in an array of dependencies, and we're going to leave that as an empty array. So that means we only want use effect called on the initial load. So if we go back to the front end, let's refresh it. Check this out. All right, so we have some errors. Let's figure this out. So get notes is failing. Let me just read through this. If anyone in the chat sees the issue, let me know. But let's just go slowly. So we have get notes. We call fetch. We hit the endpoint, response.json, and then we call set notes. Okay, we have use effect. Let's just look at the stream guide. I don't see an issue here. Let's try that one more time. Let me just try to do a hard refresh. Maybe it's just needs to be cleared. Okay. Error doesn't really tell me too much. So fetch is failing. And that might be because I didn't save main.py. Maybe that's that cores issue. Not sure. Might not have configured that the right way. Okay, I'm looking to the chat. Any lifesavers out there? Let's see. We have cores origin. Set this up right here. Let's make sure it's the wildcard. That looks good. So we have that set up. Let's also make sure the endpoint is working too. So we'll just do docs. And then if I go to get notes, try it out, execute, put notes as a dependency. I see what you're saying, but that shouldn't be the issue. It looks like there's a different issue here. Okay, so notes.js. Here, let me try something here. Let's just see if it's I updated the state or the set notes value. Maybe that is throwing the error. Cool, fun live stream. Okay, so it's not the state. We have notes and set note. Okay, so if I comment out the function, it looks like it's in the function. My use effect, did I not import use effect? No, that's there. It shouldn't be the dependency either. Okay, so it's definitely a function. Async. Yeah, we'll look at the network tab then. This is the part that I like about live streams is even though this can maybe be annoying to rewatch later, a lot of people actually learn from this process right here and seeing the debugging. So it was I think it's a performance sources. Let me try to zoom out a little bit. Oh, here we go. We have the network tab. Okay, cores error. Okay, so cores wasn't configured. So that's what that error is going to look like. So I guess I was going to show it to you later, but we found it right here. So it's a cores issue. And let's see. Let's look into the documentation and let's see exactly what's happening. Did I have to run an import? I don't think I had to run the import. So we add in cores middleware. Then we add in the origins. So something inside of main.py is the issue. So from FastAPI.cores middleware, app.add. Let's just try to restart the server here. Let's just see if we can just try a bunch of different things. Okay. Here's our React app. Oh, there we go. So I just needed to refresh it. I thought I did everything correctly. Cool. So you saw the error right there. So here's our first item in our database. If you look into HarperDB, into our studio, here is that item. So we're officially making that request, and we have successfully connected FastAPI to a React application with HarperDB, and that's how the two communicate. So if you want to see this, let's go ahead and just remove that comment. Let's try this one more time. If I go to the front end and try to make this request, we're going to see this error. So if you're seeing something like this, that's going to be that CORS issue. So here, it really doesn't tell me much. It just tells me that there's an issue inside of the get notes function. If I go to the network tab, this is where it tells me right here, status CORS error. So if you see that, that's what's happening. I know a lot of people have issues with it. I'm actually glad we had that error because I feel like that's just going to stick in your head a little bit better. So let's go ahead and save it, and let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we have our first database entry here. So if we go to this page, we don't have a note with this ID. So let's go ahead and update our note.js page. So in here, let's modify a few things. Let's comment out the dummy data. For the note itself, let's comment out found note. And let's just set null as the value. So we have no note yet. So what we're going to do is create a function called getNote. So we'll do getNote. And this is going to be an async function. We're actually doing pretty good on time. I thought this was going to take me a little bit longer. I think we're going to do this under 2 hours. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just go into getNotes, and just to speed things up, we're going to take this entire value right here, or these values, and we're going to get response. We're getting the specific note. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and use backticks here. We'll update this right here, and we're going to pass in the note ID that we want to get. So pass in note. No, let's do note ID. So that's going to be from the URL parameter. So we're getting the note specifically by the note ID. We're getting the data. Then we're going to set note. So let's remove the S. We have the note, and let's go ahead and use effect. So use effect. And by the way, I think I will expand on this tutorial. I want to use FastAPI and React to do things like authentication and so on. So definitely want to go further with this. So this will be kind of like that entry point to those tutorials. Okay, so here's the thing. If we click on add note, we have no note to get, right? We don't have a note in the ID. This value will be add. So we don't want to call this function if we're adding a note. So what we want to do here is just quickly check something. We'll just say if note ID is not equal to add. So if it's not equal to add, then what we want to do is just call get note. And we don't need the curly braces if we're only using or throwing in one value here. So we can just go ahead and check that condition here. So get note will only be called if the ID is there. So if it's not add. So we have get note. Let's just check this out. Looks like we have some kind of error. We're going into notes, note ID, and let's give this a shot. So let's just go back here, refresh it, and we'll do add. Okay, let's actually check the console and see if we have any errors. Technically, our note should load in right here. So if note, we want to change this. We want to add in note ID as a dependency. If note ID is not equal to add, let's make sure note is set here. Let's just console this out and see if it's calling it. So console.log get note triggered. Good old console.log. Hey, Harthik, it's good to have you here. You want to rewatch the tutorial if you're interested in FastAPI and React. We're just building out our notes application. You can start from the beginning. You'll see the demo, and also the thumbnail has an introduction to that. So let's just make sure get notes is being called. Let's see where this error is happening. Get notes is being triggered. Okay, so let's go to the network tab. Looks like that request just isn't working. I'll grab this ID, and we'll just try to get this single note here. First off, I want to make sure the endpoint is working. So let's try it out. Throw in the ID. Okay, so we have our note details. So we're going into no ID value. Here, let's just try it from scratch. Let's just do this. Ah, I see. So it looks like something in the backend isn't working. So how that was configured is messing things up. So we'll go into main.py and let's check this out. So we have get note with the primary key. It's a string. We're searching the database. Let's see, how did I have this in my stream guide? Let's go all the way back to setting up the backend. You have PK set up as a query parameter instead of a path parameter. Really? I'm not catching that. Let me let's just go to the notes here or the guide. So we have get note. So we have PK string. That's how I did it. And then here, let's just copy this entire route and let's just make some comparisons here. Maybe also, oh, I might have to call get attributes. Oh, because that's a path parameter, I think. It looks like it's a query parameter, but it's not. Okay, let's try get attributes here. Let's run that one more time. Look at the request in the network tab. It's, yeah, I see that it's setting it that way. I'm just not sure why. Let me just pull up the GitHub repo and see, maybe I have it different in my notes as opposed to what's in the stream guide. So we'll go into FastAPI React. We have main.py. Here we should have get note. Oh, I see what happened. So I passed in ID instead of PK. So how am I doing this everywhere else? At least I think that's what's happening. So we're supposed to do PK. That's, yeah, okay. Yeah, good call, man. Jeff, thank you. That's Jeff from JVP Design. That should fix the issue. All right, perfect. There we go. So now we have our single note. So let's go back in here. If we refresh this, now if I go to edit a note, I see the note. We make the request to the database. And then if I go to add, well, we don't have a note because we don't have a note. So we're only adding this note. Okay, so let's jump back into our stream guide. We'll go to where we left off. We got the single note. And now it's time to work on CRUD. Okay, so that's exactly what we needed to do. We got that set up here, creating and updating notes. So essentially what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function called submit data, and submit data will change the HTTP method and where we're sending data based on whether we're adding a note or updating. So let's just go ahead and start building this out. We'll close out main.py. We'll go into note.js, and we're going to create this just underneath get note. So we'll do let submit data, make this an async function. Okay, so for the request here, let's just do wait. Actually, we don't need a wait here. Let's just do fetch. And let's see, I'm trying to think of what to do here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is actually set the URL and the request method. So URL is going to be equal to this endpoint right here. So by default, we're going to assume that you're wanting to add a note. And then the method here, this is going to be a post request. So we have that set up, and then we're going to check real quick, and we're going to say if the note ID value is not equal to add, then that means we want to update a note. So we want to change the endpoint and the actual request method. So if the note ID is not equal to add, then what we're going to do is go ahead and update the URL variable. And we're just going to take this value right here, and we're just going to say notes, and we want to pass in the ID. So / and then we're going to pass in note ID. And actually, to use that variable, I need to make this backticks right here. So we can actually get that dynamic value. And the method is now going to be put. Okay, so we have that set up right here. Then if we look back into our guide, we're going to call fetch, throw in the URL, the method, and then send the actual body. So we'll wait to scroll down here so we can see everything. So we'll call fetch. And for the URL, we're just throwing in the URL. And then we want to throw in the method. That's going to be the method that we set. And after that, we want to throw in our headers. So we'll do content dash type. And this will be application /JSON. So we're sending JSON data and something doesn't look right with that request. Let me just cheat a little bit here and look at that. So we're just going to go ahead and throw in a comma, and we don't need this extra curly brace. Okay, so once we have that, we want the body. So the body here is going to be the note body. So let's actually do this. We're going to take this note right here. So I actually want to change this up. So we have the note value, and the note is going to be the actual object. So we'll go into set note, and we're just going to modify this. So we're going to throw in an object as we're updating this. We're going to use the spread operator. We're going to update the note, and specifically, we want to update the body value, and that's going to be e.target.value. So I want to make that correction right there. And then as we're sending this note, we're just going to do body, JSON, stringify, and we're just throwing in body itself. So we're doing body, and that's going to be note.body. Okay, so the method is going to change based on what we're sending here once or the type of edit or update that we're doing. What's behind you, Florin? He's back. It's like it's a bed / couch. I had a bed here. I just moved into this house and it came fully furnished. So that way I can have a couch I can read on and think on. And when guests come over, it turns into a king size bed. All right. So submit data. We'll go ahead and add this to the save button. So on submit, or on click actually, we're submitting the data. All right, let's give this a test. We'll go back into our stream guide. Okay, we're sending it the right way. We also want to redirect our user. So we have a new method in React Router DOM version 6 called use navigate. So a new React hook. We'll set that up right here. Let navigate. And this replaces, let's see, what was it called before? Florin, if you know the name, let me know. It wasn't redirect. It was something like match.path or something like that. Forgot what it was. So fast we moved on from React Router DOM version 5. Okay, so we have navigate. So once we submit this data, what do we want to do? Well, I want to redirect the user and send them back to the notes page. So we'll just call navigate, and we want to redirect them back. Okay, let's try it out. So if I go back to my application, let's edit our first note. Hit save. Here we go. It's updated. So it read that the ID was there. So it set the method to put and sent it to this endpoint. Now we want to make sure add is working. So we'll just do new note added, save it, and there we go. Awesome. So create and update is now working from the front end. And okay, yeah, it was redirect. Was it match.redirect? Something like that. Yeah, so we have that, and now delete is going to be added. So delete is going to be easy. So we're going to create a method called delete note. Make this an async function. And let's just go ahead and look at the note or stream guide here. So for this section, all we're going to do is add in a click event to the delete button. We're going to call delete note. We're going to prevent the default action from happening, and then we're just going to call await, send the delete method to that URL parameter. We don't need to send any content, and that's going to delete the note. So let's get the value here. Prevent default. So prevent default. Let's call fetch. And I'm not going to worry about error handling and all that. So at this point, we're just sending the data and then hoping it works. So we're not going to deal with the other part of things. Okay, so we're sending that request, and we need to specify the method. So the method is going to be delete. And then we're going to navigate. I think that's it. Let's go back to section. Yeah, that's all we need to do is call navigate. And we do want to await here. So if we're going to call navigate next, we'll just await that. And then navigate, we're going back to the home page. All right, so let's add a new note and then delete one. So we'll just do random note, save it. If we go back into our HarperDB Studio, we're going to see that note, or I guess we can just manually refresh it. Random note, and if we go back here, click on that random note, click on delete. Looks like we have an error. Get note triggered. Oh, I forgot to call this function. So on save or on delete, let's just call on click, let's call delete note. All right, let's call delete. And random note is deleted. Awesome. Create, update, read, and delete is done. So I think that's it for the core application. Let's move on to styling and setting up our proxy API request. Okay, so essentially what's happening here is you notice how we have these hard-coded URLs here. Well, that's not really good. What we want to do is be able to do something like this, where we just have the / and then make those requests. Well, the issue here is if I use this method, it's going to think we're on port 3000. It's going to make this request to port 3000, and it's just not going to work because that's not where our API sits. So what we're going to do is go ahead and set up a proxy URL. And once we set that up, we can update all of these. So we'll go into package.json. And all we need to do, if we look into our stream guide, is go ahead and add in proxy and then the endpoint. So if you're on a different port, you can use that port. But we're just going to specify that port, and we'll throw this in under private. I actually don't think the placement really matters. So we're just going to set this up right here, and we're going to make sure there's no trailing /. So leave it like that. Let's set up the proxy URL. So now when we make these requests, it already knows to add in all of this. So let's remove that. That's in note.js. Change all these endpoints to just a / update it where you need. And let's see, do a search for 8000. All right, so all the note page routes are done, and then we need notes right here. And I might have to restart my server. I'm not sure about this. Let's just see what happens. So if I go back here, refresh it, looks like we have an error. All right, so let's try to turn off our server, our React server, or let's turn off both, I guess, doesn't really matter. And let's restart the React server. So npm start, it might need a second for that to refresh. Let's just close this out and then give it a second to load up the new page. Boom, got it. Or as Bucky Roberts would say, boom, roasted. There we go. So now we don't have to have those ugly looking URLs. That updates it. All right, so now for the fun stuff. So we have all the logic done. If you were here to figure out how to work with React and FastAPI and HarperDB, that part is done. Now it's time for the styling. So if you're looking at the article or the stream guide, all I'm doing here is basically referring you to this live stream. So I basically said, okay, we're going to add in some styling, copy and paste some code here. And I basically tell you to look at what you're seeing right now. So we're just going to go ahead and update this. So here's our endpoint or our application. So if you go to the source code, what we're going to do is refer to all the CSS in here. So that's not the focus of this tutorial. I don't want to make it longer than it has to be. We're at an hour and 33 minutes. So I want to make sure this just goes faster. So you should be able to follow this step and just copy this. And I believe in the React Django live stream, I may have coded this up from scratch. I'm not sure. Check it out. I think I actually coded up from scratch. So if you actually want to see me code all this CSS, look at that and you should have it there. I might be wrong on that though. So, okay. So in the GitHub repo, go into source, go into app.css, and let's just copy everything from app.css. Let's take all of this, copy this, and we're going to bring this into source app.css. Let's take what's currently inside of app.css and let's just delete everything. So So that's the default code. So we're going to paste in all this new code. So what you're going to notice right here is if I save this, let's open up our Notes app. So if I save it, you're going to notice the color change immediately. So we have a dark theme and a light theme. So if you want to use the light theme, what you could do is go into layout and just remove dark, and that should give you this light theme. So we're going to have two different looks. So what we need to do now is go through our code and update all the, I guess, JSX. It's HTML, JSX, whatever you want to call it. Technically, it's JSX. So we're going to update all the class names, CSS, and so on, and then add in some icons. So let's start with our layout component. Actually, I think we have everything we need in here. So let's move on to our header. And I also think we have everything in our header. So let's just look at the actual components here. So we have header. Yeah, so we already have the class name of app header. We have layout. We have all this. List item. Let's go in here. So inside of list item, we'll deal with this function in a minute here. So that's just going to style up our preview and our timestamp. So let's go ahead and create this structure here. So let's see, we'll go into list item. And we have our link. So we need a div called class or notes list item, and then an h3 tag. So notes list item. Notes dash list dash item. And we'll add in the timestamp last because there's actually something else that we need to do there. So we have notes list item and then an h3 tag. And that should make that look a little bit better. Okay, so here we go. We see this hover effect. That looks better. And now what I want to do is move on to, I actually like the dark theme, so let's jump back to that before we move on. So we'll throw that in, and I feel like that's easier to see. So we want to get rid of these list items right here. So if we go back into, let's see, pages, we'll go into notes. So here what we're going to do is add in a wrapper called notes and then add in a header and so on. So let's build this out. We'll go into notes. I feel like I need music in these quiet parts. I'm just like quietly coding and talking to myself. Right. So we have notes. That's called notes. And I'm going to copy the entire header. So we'll take this. So we have notes header, an H2 tag with this hexadecimal value, I believe, and that's going to give us an icon with notes, with the notes title class name, and then notes count. So we're essentially just going into that notes array, getting the length of it, and that's going to give us our note total. So we'll go in here, bring this underneath our opening div. Let's comment out this link right here and save that. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so here we go. We have our notes header, notes list. We see the count. So if we add a new note, which we can't yet because we removed the button, that's going to give us the current total. Now for the actual list items or the wrapper for those, let's see, we're wrapping this in a class name of list notes. So let's just update this value. Change this to a div. And we can get rid of this li tag. So that also means that I do need the key prop now inside of list items. So we'll do key and then note.id. Right, that looks a little bit better. We'll zoom out. Let's see what else. So notes list. Okay, so now we have some icons that we need to download. So what I'll recommend here is go ahead and take this entire GitHub repo, and we're going to extract this file right here. We're going to extract this assets file. So we have an add icon, arrow icon, and a save icon. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and clone it. So I actually think I have this GitHub repo. So what I'm going to do here is simply remove it and then rerun that installation. And that might take a second. So let's open up our command prompt. We'll cd into my desktop. Let me zoom in. We're going to call git clone, paste in that URL, and we're going to give it a second while this file deletes because it's going to have a conflict with the name. Meanwhile, I'll jump into the chat. Appreciate that. Is that, I don't know how to say the name. Is it Irikla? Irikli? Probably butchered that completely. Sorry. I don't say names during live streams. I'm terrible at them. Okay, so we just cloned the entire repo. So what we're going to do is go to that file and let's go into Frontend. I can't really zoom in, but let's go into source and copy the assets folder. So we'll copy that and we'll go into our notes app here, the file that we're currently working on, go into Frontend, go into source and paste in the assets folder. So if we open up our text editor, here we now see assets here. So we see these SVGs. So now that we have that, we want to go ahead and use those icons. So those are all available for you there. It's also linked up right here and where the assets folder is. I'm sure there's other ways you can download those. So we have those. And what I want to do here is go into notes.js and import the add SVG icon. So we'll grab that. We'll go into notes.js. And then what I want to do is update some code here. So we'll go into pages, go into notes, and inside of notes.js, we have this link right here that points to add class name of floating button. So that's going to make that a fixed element in the bottom right with the add icon. So if you look at this, we import the add icon as a React component. So that just gives us a little bit more flexibility in what we can do with it. So that's how we're just going to import it. And then if we go down here, below the closing div, just above notes list, go ahead and paste this in. So a link, floating button, and the add icon. And if we check this out now, we can click plus, and here we go. So now we need to actually style the note page. So notes list is all styled up, or we're almost styled up. We still need the timestamp, but we'll get to that in a second. So we'll go into note.js and see what we need to update. So we're going to import these two things right here. We have an arrow left component and a save icon. We're going to run these imports. So we'll go into that page. And those are also inside of assets right here. So if you look at the file path, arrow left and save. And then we're going to jump into the actual styling. So class name of note and a note header. So let's take this note header, bring this in. We'll bring this in at the top. Class name of note. And what else do we need to do here? So we have this back button here. So if node ID is add, go ahead and add that. So what we need to do is just get this button right here then. And we need to throw this inside of our note header. I think I just need to close this div. And then the go back button, we're just going to remove that for now. So let's take a look at our note page. Okay, so if I look at a note, we have the go back button. Oh, that was right here. So we have the arrow left, and then we have the delete button. So if I click on add a new note, we don't see the delete button. And if I click on a note, I can delete it. So let's add a note real quick. Oh, we don't have the save button. So let's do that really quick. So we'll just add that next. For the save button, let's see. All we're going to do here is just grab this div right here with the save icon. So that's also imported. That's just below our text area. So we have the text area. Let's just duplicate or copy over this save button. Give ourselves some space. Make sure submit data is attached to that button. We have the save icon. All right, I'm looking good. So we'll add a new note. Oops. Okay, so here's our note. We can delete it. And we can update. Sweet. Okay, so that's pretty much done. Let's see what the last thing that we have to do here. So at this point, we have our note content. So let's just do this. I'll show you the issue first. Let's look up lorem ipsum. We'll get some dummy text. So let's say we have somebody that adds a note that's just ridiculously long. It has way too many characters. So we'll add a new note. We'll bring this in. So the issue here is if we go to our notes list, look at this preview. So we want to trim this down. So essentially what we want to do is limit our note to 45 characters. If our note is over 45 characters, then we just want to add 3 dots and let someone know that there is more to this note so they can actually click on it and expand it. If there's not, then we'll just give the preview of that note exactly how we originally had it. So for this, we're just going to go into our list item. So all this is going to be inside of the list item. So we're going to create a function. This is going to be outside of the list item component, and we're going to call this trimmed title. We're going to we don't need to make this an async function, but we will pass in a note, and we will make this an arrow function though. So trim title, what do we want to do here? So we're just going to jump into, we're going to get our note, and essentially we're just going to set a variable called content. That's going to be the note body. So we're going to pass in the note here. So we'll do let content note.body. And then we're going to ask a question. We're going to say if content length, so if the content length is greater than 45 characters, then we want to go ahead and trim it down. So let's see, content. So if content length is greater than 45, what we're going to do is we're just going to return back content.slice. So we're just going to slice the actual value or the string, and then we're just going to append 3 dots. Else, we just want to return the content. That's it. Okay, just want to double check, return the content, and there we go. So let's try this out. So we're going to go ahead and get trimmed title, and we're going to bring this in right here. So we're going to call trimmed title, and then we'll just pass in the note itself, save it, look at it, and here we go. So we see this long note body. Well, if it's over 45 characters, we see those 3 dots, and these ones don't have those 3 dots because they're under 45 characters. Now for the note timestamp, we're just going to go ahead and format that. So for this, let's go ahead and check out the styling for that section first. So we're going to add in a paragraph tag and a span tag, and then we'll throw in the timestamp. So paragraph tag. Okay, and if we do note dot double underscore created, or let's just do updated. So we want to know when this note was updated. Let's see what we get so far. So at this point, that's supposed to be a dynamic value. So in HarperDB, it's updated time. Okay, so that doesn't really make any sense to us. So we want to convert that. So we're going to create a function called get timestamp. So I'm just going to copy this and I'll recap what the function is doing. So get timestamp, we pass in the note, and we just call new.date, throw in updated time to local date time string, to local date string. I'm going to see if I can do date time. Actually, we'll just leave it at date. That's fine. Okay, so we're going to call get timestamp, and then we're going to call the function right here, pass in note. And there we go. That's it. That's the application. So let's jump in the chat. I'll spend another minute or 3 here. Let's see what's going on here. Just want to connect with everybody. Thank you to HarperDB for making this video possible. I mean, I was going to put together some React and FastAPI tutorials. They reached out to me and they basically said, hey, you want to try using HarperDB? Build out this application with it. So they are, in a sense, sponsoring this video. And they have a great product too. And I actually have never taken a sponsor up until this point. And that's because half the sponsors that reach out to me, or more than half, are usually offering, I don't know, I don't really like the products that they offer, but HarperDB is a great product. So yeah, thank you to them. Great hosted database. We're definitely going to check out their custom functions. If you look into the HarperDB Studio, I actually spent some time yesterday working on this. Essentially, you can actually create these functions that wouldn't even require a full backend like FastAPI, or at least that's my understanding of it. So we can just use React and HarperDB. Now, there's benefits in having a full backend API, so there's pros and cons to both, but I'll do something with that next. Let's see. What are you referring to, Shuvo? If you know nothing, then I feel really dumb. You're one of the smartest guys I know. Why not doing it with CSS? If you're referring to... I mean, I guess we can do that, but the function works well too. FastAPI plus Flutter. I did a Django Flutter video. That was with my friend Tadas Petra. But I can try doing something with FastAPI. I really want to try React Native. Honestly, React Native looks a lot sexier to me. Nothing against Flutter. I don't know. I just feel like because I use React Native might be something better, but I have not spent enough time on it. I appreciate the comments here, guys. Yeah, definitely check out the Medium guide. That's really going to help you if you want to read it. Technically, that guide isn't meant to read alone. It's meant to be used with the stream. So check that one out. And yeah, let's see. JVP design. I don't know about you, but you at UTC is the only way every time. I mean, I don't even read a clock. It's all digital now. Check out JVP design, by the way. He has a lot of FastAPI tutorials. I probably should have said that in the beginning of the stream because unfortunately a lot of people rewatching might drop off by this point, but I want to give him a shout out. He just opened up his channel, and I believe he actually was correct me if I'm wrong, a professor at a university. Were you teaching CS, or how did that go? Or was it a high school? It's Jeff Palmer, I believe, on Twitter. I'll look up his channel and everything. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure Jeff gets a shout out here. And for some reason on Twitter, my search bar isn't working. It might be a plugin that I installed. So never mind. I guess we can't do that. All right. Applied Math PhD. Awesome. Wow. That's sweet. Yeah, it's here. Jeff, can you send your Twitter link? I'll click it right now and I'll actually open it up. Let me try to find it. Just don't have that search. You can give me your handle. Let me pull that up. And I'll pull up your YouTube channel too. So he just started his YouTube channel like a week or two ago. So here is Jeff's YouTube channel. Make sure you give him a subscription there. Subscribe to his channel. He's a full stack developer. He's doing a lot of FastAPI stuff. So he just put out a series. I remember just starting my channel. This is kind of what my feed looked like too. I was doing a bunch of Django stuff. But make sure to subscribe. Check him out. There's going to be a lot of FastAPI stuff, I'm sure. He also does a lot of Django stuff too. All right. Well, that's it for this stream. Again, thank you everybody for watching. It's always a lot of fun for me doing this. I prefer doing these live. I kind of got tired of pre-recorded tutorials. It's just a lot more fun to actually engage and see my students too. And I definitely want to work out something where I can even hear audio. This was a side project that I worked on. It's mumble2.dev, where we build out this interactive live streaming application. By the way, if anybody wants to give this a test, check it out right now. This is basically almost like a Twitch clone, and I built it up really quick in a tutorial, so it has a lot of work to be done on it. But essentially, you can create a room and have people join. It's like a Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces thing. So let's just look up Dennis Ivy. Yeah, check this out, guys. Go to mumble2.dev and join this room. So if we go to Mumble2, if I join the room, you should see this live room right here. It's I'm live. You can click join, and then if you want to join the actual stream, looks like I had OBS open, so it will not let me join, but I could join with audio, or I can try sharing my screen. There we go. So I'm sharing my StreamYard's link right here. Here we have live chat. If you want to learn how to build this, I guess I'm just going to go into promo mode and start pitching everything. Look up Traversing Media. And here is a full tutorial on how to build this. So here we go. We did a WebRTC application. So I built out a peer-to-peer chat application and then a full, I guess, Mumble2 application. So Jeff is now in the room. So if I zoom out, I can see Jeff in the chat. Jeff, you can actually join the stream. If you want to try chatting, give it a test, let me know. Or just click right here. So click join somewhere here and then open up your screen. So I can actually see multiple people and then change this right here. If you're not too shy, Jeff. Share. Oh, I'm not sharing screen. Wow. Or I'm not sharing my screen. Here we go. This is where I'm at right here. So this is the application. Sorry about that. Okay, so it looks like Jeff is actually live. Jeff, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Jeff? No. Here he is. So check it out. So everyone else can join mumble2.dev. I need to. Awesome. Here, let me share my audio from the screen. I need to reload it up. All right. So I think everybody in the stream should now hear your audio, Jeff. So it wasn't recording it. And you're probably hearing me from YouTube or from Mumble. It's going to take about 5 seconds for him to actually hear what I'm saying. YouTube. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. That's the delay. But sweet. Yeah. You're on the stream. Awesome. Check it out. Yeah. If you want to build that, I know we completely went into a side tangent. That's live streaming for you. But I think I'm going to tune out for now. But yeah, you can go in here. We have 2 participants in the room. That's our 1 live room. I'm going to work on this and actually do this with React and make this a little bit better. But thank you all for joining. That's it for the stream. Make sure to check out Jeff's YouTube channel. Check him out on Twitter. It's Jeff Polymer. Poimer? I'm totally butchering that. But yeah, sorry about that, Jeff. All right. Take care, everyone.